Welcome back, everyone, to my podcast. I'm Stephen. I'm an ex-Royal Naval clearance diver. I was a salvage diver and also worked offshore as a commercial diver, air and saturation. The podcasts are really about that period in my life and some of the stories, some of the interesting stories that happened to me. Some of them are funny, some of them are sad, and some of them are quite frightening. This particular episode, which is episode 5, covers my time when I was on the Scotland Northern Ireland clearance diving team in Rosyth in Scotland. I'd left my mine hunter and I joined the team at Rosyth. And this team basically were what they call a bomb team. So they covered Scotland, Northern Ireland. So any IED in the water, any EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, improvised devices, basically any work that involved in the water and under the water came to us. There's many of these teams throughout the UK, and if we had larger jobs, we'd sometimes combine the teams, but it never really happened in the time I was on the Rosyth team. You can imagine that when you join, I was in the accommodation block in HMS Cochrane, so most of the divers actually lived within HMS Cochrane. We had 2 diving officers, which we referred to as Boss 1 and Boss 2. And we had our chief diver, and we had our POs, and we had some lead divers, and then we had divers, clearance divers. That was the team. It was a very, very tight team. You can imagine that we lived together, we worked together, so we got to know other people's families, girlfriends, wives, and in some cases, children. So there was a very, very tight team, and we'd have parties as well and invite many other people along from different parts of Cochrane. That's to give you an overview of the team itself. There was, in terms of what was available to us, we had multiple Land Rovers, bomb mine disposal Land Rovers. They called them Red Wings. They had bomb mine disposal on the side. We also had a 3,500 weight vehicle and a 3-ton lorry, all converted to move equipment like inflatables and pumps, etc., and all our diving gear. If we had to get explosives, within Cochrane itself, there was a secure area where we would be able to go up and draw debts, scare charges, P4, whatever we required to do the job. We also had things, 4-pound packs, which were used mostly to detonate mines. So very interesting. I loved it. It was what I wanted to do. I wanted to join the team. But obviously I'd left HMS Gaventon under a small cloud. So when I joined the team, the chief, I don't think particularly wanted to be on the team. He wasn't a bad guy. In fact, he was awarded a medal at some point for his work on the team. I was lucky because I joined. You had teams within teams depending what jobs you were going to be on. And I was under Johnny Fryer, who was a PO, excellent guy, and I actually met him at a funeral last year, a year before, I can't remember. And I actually thanked him for looking after me during that period. You know, once I was on his team, it was fantastic. But just prior to that, you know, just the initial part was a little bit difficult, not getting on jobs, etc. And Johnny took me under his wing, and any job Johnny was on, I was on it as well. And he got some great jobs. So it was great for me. So when you join the team, you're issued kit as well. And would you believe I was issued a Rolex Submariner, 5513, I think is the type. Now this was a bunch of Submariners, Rolex Submariners, that were given to the Navy, and they all had the Pussler's mark on them. Now, nobody cared about these Rolexes. Nobody cared. You were issued one, just put it on. very similar to the pusser strap, and off you went. Nowadays, these watches, because they're so unique, they can go up to £500,000 now for that watch. But of course, at the time, we didn't know that, and I just handed mine back. But, you know, if I'd taken it, it would have been stealing. I did actually get my own Rolex. When I was in Oban, I had an Omega, which I'd bought, because I was always interested in watches. I had a diving Omega watch, and I actually seen this Rolex Submariner in the window in Oban, and I bought it and sold my Omega to one of the other dive guys on the dive team, and I paid £176 for it. Would you believe? Now, that was 1978, and I sold it, I think, in 84 for about £500. Wish I hadn't sold it, but, you know, a little glitch at that time, and a lot of offshore divers weren't getting much work. So, you know, you had to start looking at what you could sell. You also issued what they call a BD jacket. It's a little short jacket, bomb disposal jacket. Only clearance divers get issued these on bomb teams. Nobody else gets issued them. You also get a lot of camouflage kit as well. We were one of the few that were issued this. And there was a load of other stuff, diving kit, undersuits, etc., etc. One of the first sort of introductions that I had was I was sent up in the Land Rover to pick up some bits and pieces from Cochrane, as we were based right down in the dockyard, right at the other end of the dockyard in Rosyth. So I jumped in the Land Rover, drove up. I was going to be picking up some bits and pieces. Big, massive car park in Cochrane. So I parked the Land Rover there, and I thought I'd just nip in. Now, there was a standard procedure at that time, obviously, Northern Ireland was going on, that you locked the Land Rover. Now, I didn't know, I wasn't aware that there were actual debts in the Land Rover under the area of the seat. There was a secure area, a lock, where we put the debts. I didn't know that. So when I drove the Land Rover up and parked it, I just jumped out, didn't lock it, went in, got what I was required, was going back to Land Rover, and as I look at the car park, the Land Rover is not where I parked it. It's way, way down the bottom. And I'm like, oh my God, what the bloody hell's happened here? So I ran down to the Land Rover, sort of panicking slightly. And as I get there, I noticed there's a note on the window, and it says, you have left this wagon unlocked. You know, please report to the regulating office. And you'll know from my last video, I wasn't very popular with the regulating office. So when I seen this, a report at 1:30 to the regulating office, and honestly, I was panicking. So I jumped back in the Land Rover, drove back to the team, to our unit, and I went and knocked on the chief's door. And I was talking to the guys, and they were like, you are for it. You do not leave that Land Rover unlocked, Stephen. What are you doing? And they were like, yeah, you better go and tell the chief. So I went in and knocked on the door. The chief came out, and he was like, yeah, what do you want? I was like, well, chief, you know, I've got blah, 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 and, you know, there's a note, and I've got to go up to regular. He goes, yeah, well, you bloody deal with it then. Closes the door, and I'm like, what? I need some help. So I go back, and the guys are all there, and they're like, God, Stephen, you're. And it's now like 1 o'clock, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, right, I better just go up to the regulating office. So I'm going outside, I'm getting in the Land Rover, and suddenly the guys are outside, and they are killing themselves laughing. One of them had seen me go in and went across, noticed that it was unlocked, and then 2 or 3 of them took the handbrake off, pushed it down the bottom, and then wrote the note. But you have no idea the relief once I knew it was them, because I genuinely thought, oh my God, I am going to get bloody charged this time. So that was not quite the first week, but that period. One thing, I never left that Land Rover or any other vehicle unlocked. Also, we ended up, we were about to go to an area in Ireland, and I'll expand on that particular job. So we went, we had to go up to Loch Sunart to do some deep diving workup. So you work up to a depth of 40 metres. Loch Sunart, we hired or rented a lodge when we were up there, and we would go out and do some serious deep diving. Now, we're doing surface air dive, so this was a hose supplied down to our kit with a small bailout bottle. So two of us would drop 40 odd metres, we'd get down the bottom of the rope, and we would just keep an eye on each other while we did a little circular search, come back. But I always remember, I can't remember the diver's name actually, but we got down the bottom. It was our first sort of deep dive. We'd been doing 100 foot and 120, and this was the deep dive. So we ended up at the bottom. It was pitch black. I'm absolutely, we're right up against each other, kind of keeping an eye on each other. And I noticed he's laughing, and I could see his whole face moving up and down. And the more he laughed, I mean, we're both out of our tree with nitrogen narcosis, the more he laughs, the more I start to laugh. And we are killing ourselves laughing. Absolutely. And I mean, I really had to watch because, it was, we were laughing that much that I could have easily spat out my mouthpiece. We each had what they call bone conductors on the back of our ear. So we could speak and on the surface could hear. You used to sit just behind the ear. And when you speak, it picks up your voice. It's not 100%, but it does work. Of course, on the surface, all they could hear was this hysterical laughing. And they were shouting at us. It was just one of these moments that now I just remember vividly. I remember us both. And as you leave bottom, we're coming up. Obviously, the narcosis disappears, but we're both the chief and Terry were not happy at us. We were like, what the effing were you two laughing at? You were out of here. And it's weird. It's the weirdest sensation. Anyway, that's another little story that of that time. My first bomb job was our first mine on the team. Finding a mine and destroying it was, we got a call, and we have these emergency calls, normally from the police or from the Coastguard. And they said, look, there's a trawler at Pittenweem and it's found what looks like a mine. Can you guys go and have a look? So we jumped in the bomb wagon and we shot across. And Pittenweem, where we were south to Pittenweem, I don't know, it was about an hour or something, I can't remember. Anyway, we get there and we again make contact with the Coastguard, and they go, oh, because we couldn't see any trawler, but we were speaking to people down in the harbour, and they were like, nah, nothing here. And you expect to see police and a few other people. So we call them and they say, oh, we made a mistake. It's Port Seton, not Pittenweem. Now, Port Seton is on the opposite side of the river River Forth. So we had to go all the way back across the bridge into Edinburgh, right through the centre of Edinburgh on a Saturday. And you can imagine how busy Edinburgh is on a Saturday. But we're allowed to call the police to give us escort, and that's exactly what they did. And my God, I was so impressed. My first experience of the police just getting us through the middle of Edinburgh or escorting us. 2 cars, and they just pushed other cars out the way so that we could go right through the middle. Absolutely fantastic. Real professional stuff. Real professional. Anyway, we're there, blue light, siren, they're ahead of us, pushing people out the way. And it is amazing. It always amazes me that some police would be pushing cars and stopping and moving, and we would come through, and you get people just take the space up again. It was mad. I remember this old guy. He'd obviously come onto a junction. The police had stopped. Everybody had stopped. and we were coming forward, and he just pulled out right in front of us, even though we had blue lights on, siren going, the police are, he was just like ignoring, la, 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 la. We're right behind him. And eventually, the police come up alongside him and give him an absolute, utter bollocking. But even then, he was like, and he pulled in. It was like, do you think the blue light and the siren, and I'm sure, ambulances and police have experienced this before as well. Anyway, we get through Edinburgh to Port Seton, and I can't remember how far Port Seton, it isn't far from the centre. Anyway, we arrive, small harbour, there's a few police there, etc. So we get down onto the harbour, and there's the mine. It's on the jetty. They haven't, they caught it in the net. I mean, this thing is quite big. It's not a small trawler. They've got this thing. Instead of leaving it in the net so that if we would go back out, we'd just lower it back on the seabed, we'd do a dive and we'd blow it. But they decided that they'd cut it out the net and lift it onto the jetty. And it was July, it was very warm. And we don't want these things sitting on jetties. If it went off, it would have just obliterated everything and everybody in quite a big radius. This was a GD, a German, we had D for dainty, but it was about 500 pounds of hexadite, I think it was. The Germans used, we used Torpex. But anyway, there was two types of ground mine that we kind of dealt with. There were other ones, and these ground mines were dropped either by subs or by parachute. And if you can imagine the River Forth at that time, during the Second World War, these are all Second World War mines, was, the Germans would drop lots and lots of mines in there. So there it was, gleaming on the jetty, because it had been rolling around the seabed. It was just, and they were very pleased that they'd cut it out for us and laid it on the jetty. We're like, okay. So we get it. Now we have to rehandle it. So we have to get it back on. We check to make sure what it is, what state it's in, etc. And then we determine what we need to do with it. Two things mostly is that we get it on board and we keep water on it, keep it cool. So we get back out to the middle of the Forth, and we drop it onto the seabed, lower it onto the seabed with 2 4-pound packs with Cortex, and just on the surface we would have the dead. And this is the key thing in the Navy, is that you want the debt on the surface, because if it doesn't blow, if it doesn't happen, you could just go across, snip the debt off. You do not have to get into the water to get to touch the debt. Later on, when I was doing salvage work, that wasn't the case. The debt was placed into the explosive submarine blasting gel. So you'd put a little hole in it with a pencil and put your debt in and close it up with 2 wires, and you'd connect the wires up on the surface. If it didn't go off, you had to go in the water to remove the debt and the explosive, which, it's not a good thing to do. Anyway, bang, a really good bang. You got £4 plus the main charge. Boom, big bang. Always loved it. Big splash on the surface. Brilliant. And that was pretty regular, that you would see mines. We also had one down at Sea Houses, and it wasn't that far away. I mean, we were talking about, once or twice a month we'd be getting these. The one in Sea Houses was slightly worse, because when we arrived, again, it was quite warm, and it was the inside of a buoyant mine. Is about 400 odd pounds of Torpex, I think it is. And it eroded, so you can actually see the explosive. So it has like a primer and a debt. The debt burn. This is all about burning at a different rate, and the big charge needs the primer to kick it off. And to kick off the primer, you need a debt which burns at a higher rate. Anyway, they were all in place. They were all kind of there, and this thing was just, been there, sitting there for, I don't know, an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and they'd taken it off. I can understand why they take them off the trawler. I wouldn't want it on my trawler as well. It does mean double handling the thing anyway. So we get there, and you could actually see little bits of crystallisation starting on the explosive. So again, lots and lots of water on it. Get it back on, take it out, lower it down, and blow it. So another big bang. It's very satisfying. As a young lad, you're just in your element. And if you see episode 1, when I was young, and I had the opportunity to look at 2 bits of ordnance, you can see where I'm coming from, the handling of it. And it's a very funny thing, and I think it's youth. I never felt frightened at any point. Isn't that a weird thing? And I think that's the idea. If you want people to fight a war and be in danger, they need to be young, because the older you get, the more risk-averse you become. Along with dealing with exploding ordnance disposal, etc., we also would deal with IEDs that were local or were related to water in some way. But this particular one, it was Christmas time, and it's the one I remember most, I suppose. We got a call, and I'm not too sure if it was the skipper of HMS Cochrane, but I remember at this time we had IRA, we had letter bombs being sent out to people, etc. Now, we were called up because there was a letter appeared. I'm sure it was for the skipper of Cochrane, or maybe one of his staff. And in it was just an envelope, but it was like grease coming through. You could see it and you could feel it. It was like explosive inside, and the writing was quite erratic. So we came up, we put it into our secure box, took it away. And we have a thing called pig stick. I'm sure at that time it was very hush-hush. I'm sure I can speak about it now. And we would put it into a secure area, and pig stick was like a little canister of water with explosive that basically shredded things without causing any heat. So it shredded this, and it was really bad in a sense, because this letter had been sent by this guy's daughter, and inside was a piece of Christmas cake, and she had sent it to him. So we had shredded it. Yeah, there was just bits of Christmas cake everywhere. But it's better that than it being a real bomb or a real letter bomb. Also, we were called up to Peterhead. There was I think he was a political prisoner, and he had received this box, and nobody was meant to have known where he was. So this box appeared. So we were brought up and we x-rayed it, and it didn't look like there was anything in it. There was no metal or what looked like plastic explosive. But on the safe side, we thought, well, pig stick it, shred it, and let's see what's inside. So when we did that, it was just like bits of paper. It was just letters, about 10 letters or something like that. Most of them shredded by now. The worst part was, seemingly, this was the story I got when we'd finished. He had stayed at a rented apartment, and the woman who had re-rented it, but the people that were there, just letters would come for him and would give them to the landlord, and the landlord eventually got them all. And he had known that he was in prison, but didn't know which prison, so he contacted seemingly the prison system, and they eventually were able to trace him and send him up to Peterhead for him. So there was about 10 letters, and we shredded the lot. But I must admit, if you think about it, you got plenty of time in prison, so just give him everything and some sellotape, and away he goes. So that was a couple of little stories about the IED side as well. With IED, we would have what's called wheelbarrows with the shotgun and camera and a little remote control robot that would go ahead. And there was quite a number of these. I think I wasn't on a great number of them, because mostly it was diving we were dealing with in EOD. And we would have the bomb suits, but we were all trained to use the bomb suits. And it was always, you see them with the helmets and the big thick glass face and the massive green kind of padding with shields. Just if the bomb goes off, hopefully you'll be alive. But you don't have any gloves, so the chances are you'll probably lose your hands. But that was interesting. We'd done training on IED work. In fact, some of it we learned how to make IEDs, which is really interesting as well. Part of the team's job was to collect out-of-date pyrotechnics from the Coastguard. It was a little thing we helped them with. So we would go around, you would get a week. It was a nice little jolly, actually, because you got expenses. And it was, I can't remember, it was like £13 a day. And most of the time we would just sleep in the Land Rover or whatever and then take the money. Terrible. But as you go round, it's a great wee job because you can go up the west coast Scotland, collecting from all the Coastguard stations. So any of their out-of-date pyrotechnics like flares, etc., we would take and put in a secure box. Eventually, when we're finished, we would take them maybe to Ballybudden or to Otterburn, and we would destroy them, mostly just with a magnesium block. These blocks, you just stick them in the middle and they burn like horrendously. It'll just destroy anything around it. But it was good. These things called shamulis, which you activate and it would fire a flare. So it was great. It was a lovely little jolly. I do remember getting quite ill though. We'd been living in Land Rover and eating rubbish and driving to the next one. Not the best way to do it, but trying to save money. And eventually I wasn't 100%, and I said to Johnny, look, can we just stay at a bed and breakfast so I can get it, because I had terrible diarrhea. So we went to this, in Oban, we went to this bed and breakfast, and we stayed overnight. And I was out, and I tried to eat, but I just rushed back to the bed and breakfast. And that time there's no ensuite toilet. So I do remember running up the stairs, running towards the toilet, banging the door open to the toilet, and this old woman sitting there and screaming her head off. You imagine nowadays, and she's screaming her head off, and I had that moment, but it was like, oh my God, slammed the door shut, ran along the corridor to the next one. Too bloody late, You end up, and eventually I got to the toilet, but it was far, far too late. And I took the underpants off and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with these? So I opened the window and there was a tree and I kind of just threw them out onto the tree. I know it's not a nice thing to do, but I just wanted rid of them. Anyway, got cleaned up. And probably about 4 months later, I actually went back. We went back to the same bed and breakfast, and there were my underpants still on the tree. The leaves had fallen off, and there was a pair of, I remember them as yellow tartan underpants hanging on the tree. It was just so funny. These things happen. We would also get called to do jobs in the harbour itself. At Rosyth, sometimes to look at ships, and one of the jobs was we had to go down. There was a destroyer in, and we had to look at their intakes. One of their intakes was obviously blocked with something. Now, these things are huge. These ships, and what you have is lumps of wood, big blocks of wood, but the ship. It's between the ship and the wall. They're right down the surface of the water, and they just keep the ship away from the wall. And they're massively thick and long. But in between them, there's big gaps where you can jump in. So that's normally where we would get to the edge, and it's about a 20-foot drop into the water. So you just jump off, hold on straight, but you had to jump between the two big massive wooden floats. So you didn't want to hit one of them at 20 feet with all your kit on. It would really upset you. So that was my job, was to pop down and have a look at this. And it was my first jumping in between the blocks. So I got my gear, make sure there's a bit of slack in the lifeline, and nobody told me that, normally you just look ahead and take a step out, but nobody told me that you just don't take too much of a step out, because what happened to me is that I took the big step out and went slamming up against the side of the destroyer, and all the way down the slide. It was like bang, all my kit and everything splash into the water. The guys were killing themselves laughing. I got myself sorted on the surface, but even I was laughing, because once you step off, you're just almost hurtling towards the side, dropping and moving against the side of the hull of the ship. Anyway, I went down, and to be honest, I remember not finding anything, and then going to the next intake, and there was nothing. So there was nothing wrong with the ship at all. So it must have been internal rather than external, why there wasn't water coming through. On this particular job in the harbour, we were called to look for a set of keys. And these, it was just a bunch of keys that had been lost. And we get this cock and you pop down, Navy ship, a Navy boat, I should say. And they said, I was walking the gangway and it fell down there. And my heart kind of sunk, because chances it's deep, gooey mud on the bottom and it'll just disappear. Anyway, he was quite a sensible guy. He'd got a bit of rope with a weight on the end, and he'd thrown it over the side where he thought roughly his keys had fallen. So I just dropped in the water. My heart thought, I'll go down and have a look, but the chances are 1,000,000 to 1. And as I go down, this is one thing you learn, is if you're doing a search and there's a weight and the weight's dropped, look under the weight first. And I swear, you couldn't write this. And it's about 20 feet of black water, so I'm going down very gently, and I eventually get his weight, and I put my hand under the weight, and there's the keys. And what's the chance of that? I mean, all of us thought, there's no chance. Came to the surface, and the guy could not believe that we'd found his keys that quickly. I mean, normally I would just now we need to start circling out with my hands in the mud to try and find it. But it was directly under the weight. Excellent. So happy. He was happy. I was happy. Another one, this is a bigger job we had to do, and that was HMS Natal was sunk, and I think it's in the Moray Firth. That might be wrong. We were staying at Nairn. I think we were staying at Nairn. Our job basically was Natal was a wreck, but she had large lumps of her were quite shallow, and they wanted to create a new route out, and they needed it to be deeper. Our job was to go in below anything that was above a certain depth. I think it was about 40 foot, so we would swim the wreck, marking off stuff that was exposed higher than 40 foot. And then we'd get these massive blocks of explosive. I mean, there were massive blocks with a primer in the end, and we'd just put them directly on top of these big lumps and just blow them to bits. So we're doing this day in and day out. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed the job. The weather was good as well. The only little thing was very tiring, obviously. You were diving and humping these blocks, massive blocks of explosive around the bottom. Our chief, who, Terry Settle, his name was, like I say, is a good guy. But he decided we were all a bit, I think we were going from, I think it was Allness to somewhere else, where we were actually doing the explosives. And I think we're staying at Allness, actually. And he wanted us to run every morning. Can you imagine? I can't remember. It would take, I can't remember how long it took. But it was a fair run in the morning, because he thought we were all getting a bit soft. So he said, right, you run there. So you imagine we were running. We wouldn't run back at night, obviously, but in the morning we'd run there. He would drive up in the Land Rover, and then we would start diving. So one morning we were all sitting there, and somebody said, "You joining us for a run this morning, Chief, are you? You going to join us?" And he got a bit angry. He said, yeah, well, bloody come with you. I'll show you buggers, you know. Anyway, you imagine we're all pretty fit guys. Terry hadn't really run for a bit. I think after a little while, he realised that he was never going to keep up with us. But I do remember this, and I admire him for it. He decided to get himself fit, and he ended up doing a marathon and dropping weight. And so I do admire him for that as well, that he obviously was realised that his idea of fitness and our idea of fitness were probably two different things, but he changed that himself. That really covers that period. I mean, I'm going to do additional stories about some of the larger jobs that I was involved in. So there will be small episodes related to this one. I'll give an example. One is about us in Rathlin Island in Northern Ireland. Another one is recovering a helicopter in Northern Ireland and, sadly, two bodies as well. So these are some of the stories that are coming up. Another one, really, which always makes me laugh, is that we found a Russian sonar buoy and we took it into the middle of London. That's an interesting one. So these are all coming on their way. But look, I really appreciate, as normal, you listening and looking at this video. You guys take care. All the best.